Fiery protests have broken out in New Caledonia's capital ahead of a vote to change the territory's constitution. A decision taking place some 16,000 kilometres away. On Tuesday in Paris, the National Assembly will make its final vote on amendments that could see more French residents able to vote in provincial elections. For many, it's not a welcome change.
We hope that the state listens to us, that they realise that we don't agree with this. We don't agree with that law, with the text that they've laid there. We don't agree at all.
Protests against the proposed law have been building over the last 10 days. But on Monday night, security forces were mobilised as violence escalated, leading to dozens of arrests. Numerous buildings, including shops and car dealerships, were damaged, with officials reporting 200 vehicles had been burned. New Zealand's Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, was scheduled to visit this week, but cancelled due to the unrest.
We're here today to set up banners to say no to enlarging the electorate.
Currently, voting is restricted to the Indigenous Kanak people and migrants who have lived in New Caledonia since at least 1998. France wants to open up voting rights to migrants who have lived in the territory for 10 years or more. An extra 25,000 people. Independence supporters worry this would weaken the Indigenous population's vote.
We hope that our voice, our dignity and our pride of being the people of Kanaki will be heard by the General Assembly.
All gatherings in the greater part of the capital have been banned, with a curfew in place until Wednesday morning. Madeline Lo-Booth, ABC News.
Former Australian Consul-General in New Caledonia and visiting fellow at the ANU Centre for European Studies, Denise Fisher, is with us. Denise, good to see you. This discontent has been brewing for a little while now. What's behind it?
Well, hello, Beverley. Yes, it has. It's not something that's just happened, out of the blue. It's been these demonstrations were planned very carefully. We've had a number of demonstrations in recent months, but certainly in the last week. And yesterday's was to coincide. It was called by independence leaders, largely Kanak independence leaders, who are wanting to express opposition to legislation currently being considered in Paris, across the other side of the world. Legislation which will change the French constitution in order to impose on New Caledonia a change to voter eligibility requirements. The thing that they're objecting to is not just the fact that this is all being decided in Paris, way over the other side of the world, but because the subject is central to Kanak concerns about the governance of New Caledonia. The voter eligibility requirements confine voters eligible for local election to vote in local elections to those who have long-standing connections in New Caledonia. So a vote was being held in Paris over this change, just as in New Caledonia, independence leaders organised a discussion in the local Congress to actually get it to be withdrawn. The discussion was extremely bitter all day yesterday. It was long. Outside in the streets, their supporters were protesting against the legislation in Paris. The discussions raised all the bitter differences between both sides, as you can imagine. In the end, it was passed. The resolution was passed because the independence leaders had support from a small minority party. But meanwhile, frustration was mounting. By the end of the day, Mr. Macron in Paris was offering a gesture, talks in Paris, but only after the National Assembly has passed the legislation. It's important to say also that the legislation wanted this constitutional change, but they would withdraw it if they wouldn't act on it if local discussions took place about the future. It was a pressure tactic by Mr. Macron to encourage discussion locally. Yeah. But even despite this gesture by Mr. Macron, at the end of the day, I think tensions were mounting so much that things just got out of control last night. And sadly, we haven't seen this sort of violence, Beverley, since the early 80s, the bad old days of civil disturbances in New Caledonia.
Yeah. What is the impact that Macron is trying to have? Ultimately with these electoral changes, what are they trying to thwart independence? Are they trying to thwart the way New Caledonia governs?
No, I think all sides fundamentally see that there has to be another look at the voter eligibility provisions. I think even many Kanak leaders would accept that that the kind of change that was agreed to in order to secure peace 30 years ago, in other words, confining voter eligibility to people who had 10 years residence to 1998, obviously now, today, needs to be looked at again. But the key thing is that independence leaders want it looked at in New Caledonia, around a table, led by a dialogue mission. They no longer trust the senior leaders in France to conduct talks in Paris. They want them in New Caledonia. They see it as central to their concerns to preserve voting rights for essentially those with long-term interests in New Caledonia. You know, Beverley, French being France it's a territory of France. So you've got French people posted out for a couple of years to administer the territory, then they go back on other postings. You know, the independence leaders want to be sure that it's going to be people with long-term connection to France. And they also want it to be New Caledonians to decide how long the residence requirement should be, not people over in Paris on the other side of the world. So it's a very vexed issue, and I think Mr. Macron sought to use it as a way of bringing people to the table. This is what we'll do. We need to look at it where we have democratic principles in France, one person, one vote. But if you come around a table, we won't act on this. It's to encourage them to do that. Sadly, I think the response last night, and this is not just a few rioters, this was very difficult to see, very orchestrated attacks on iconic French businesses in Noumea. First of all, looting, then burning of buildings and businesses. Homes were burnt. There were blockades stopping access in and out of Noumea for quite some time. Airports were blockaded in the outer islands more peacefully than in Noumea. And then there was shooting upon police. There were stonings of police. And all of this was perpetrated largely by very young Kanak Indigenous people. So it's a major concern. It's shaken up, I think not just the European people who live in the centre in Noumea, but also the wider polity in New Caledonia. This is quite serious for the future.
Yeah, and as you point out, nothing like this has been seen since the bad old 80s, to characterise that wave. France is going to send reinforcements. They've imposed a curfew. Would that not incite things more, or do you think that could calm things down?
Well, I think that's a really important point, Beverley. I think the truth is France is handling it as a security issue in France. And of course, law and order needs to be re-established. They have 700 security personnel in New Caledonia. They're bringing in overnight, as we speak, at least that many more to reimpose law and order. But if France is going to treat this as just any other security issue, any other demonstration, as it does in any other part of France, I think that would be a mistake, because what needs to be addressed are the fundamental political differences. In one of your reports, ABC's reports tonight, there was an interview with a Kanak woman on the streets demonstrating yesterday. And she very eloquently said, we feel we're not being respected and we are not being listened to in our own country. So the way France deals with this will be very important as the days go on.
Denise, so much appreciate your expertise on this. We will see, as you say, how it settles. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Bev.